Well, welcome to the very first coffee show. I'm your host, Kirk Pearson, the coffee show with Kirk. It's called first ever episode of this new standalone podcast. First guest, none other than Ross Quail. Please welcome to the show, Ross.
Thanks for having me, Kirk. It's great to be here.
Ross, we just had an interesting, an unannounced question here for you. You just came to my cafe, which is just down the road from here, had a coffee, enjoyed it. Thank you for the compliments. But you immediately said that I need to put my prices up. Let's talk about this.
All right.
Point blank. And first thing you said to Johan after you just met him, like literally 20 seconds after, poor guy, you need to put your prices up. Why's that?
Well, the price of your coffee often is looked in isolation. It's like, it's just this cup of coffee that sits in front of me and it is an island to everything else that exists around it. That's not how the coffee industry works. All right. So when I see a cup of coffee, I think equipment, I think barista, I think roaster, you think farmer, you think all of those linkages in the chain. Now, what you're doing at your cafe is making great coffee, all right? So you've got a level of investment, both maybe emotionally and financially, right through that whole chain. And that chain costs money, right? Not just for the fact that a great barista makes a great coffee, and there is a difference between one person and another. So getting that one person who makes a great coffee every day, right? You pay those people to turn up. You inspire them to work at your venue, not at somebody else's venue. And all of that represents a level of work that warrants a cost. And for me, $6 for an 8-ounce coffee, that is something that's memorable, that tastes great, that tells a story. There shouldn't be any equivocation about that. It's only once we start to look at things as they're like, this is a physical object, that we start to begin this process of devaluing. And that's what I rail against, really, because look, if it's not worth $6, people will tell you, all right? And that's fine. And your business won't do as well as somebody else's. But unless the businesses that are great stand behind their product and really champion and embrace it, we're all just teetering at the edge, being worried about whether or not will they like us or not, and maybe have a bit of imposter syndrome. I just wanted to sort of jar you out of that and say, you are good. People should and will pay $6 for this.
Well, it's probably a good kick up the bum, really, because we're probably overdue to do this. And, you know, I think our coffee's worth $6 a pop. Do you agree?
100%.
Johan, when are we putting our prices up? Next week? Done. All right. So great. You've helped make some progress. Welcome to the coffee show with Kirk. That was a great little preamble. So one thing, you and I have had some private discussions in the last few months, last few years, really.
Yeah.
And I think that I wanted to do this episode about, I live so much in specialty that it's kind of a bubble that it's hard to escape from. And I don't like hearing the same voices. I like hearing different voices.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to do a podcast episode covering some of the topics coming from big coffee. So, you know, some of the bigger coffee companies in the world. So what I've done is sort of outline 4 companies that we're going to kind of look at through this paradigm, let's just say, and then have some questions at the end. But those 4 companies are Starbucks, Luckin Coffee, new entrant into the game, I guess you could say, Blank Street Coffee, another one that's really interesting to watch over in the US and London. And then a business over in Indonesia that's just started up that you introduced me to called Jago Coffee, which is run by a mutual friend of ours, Joshua Tanu, who's part of the Common Grounds group. But also I reached out to him and let him know, and he was really excited. And I'm really fascinated by what they're doing and bringing access to coffee for more people and by more people as well. So that's a fascinating one that we'll go through. So basically how I've structured this is we'll go through 4 companies. We'll start with Starbucks. Some of the things that they do really well, some of the things that they don't do, that they might experience challenges with in the near future. Get your running commentary. We'll go through some questions at the end. Sound good?
Sounds great.
All right, so Starbucks. Most notable thing I'll say about Starbucks, and I think a lot of people will have seen, it's much more of a pop culture thing actually than just within the coffee industry. They've got a new CEO named Brian Niccol. And Brian Niccol was the former CEO of Chipotle. He had enormous success in I guess not revitalizing, but bringing that brand into prominence over in the US. And so he's taking some of that into coffee. So, and they've paid him a mint to come and work for them. So they had a previous CEO named Laxman. I'm not going to attempt his surname because I'll butcher it, but they've moved on to him to kind of revitalize the company. So some of the challenges for facing Starbucks: declining revenue, customer dissatisfaction, workforce cuts. So they've recently just cut some of their executive team. Unionization efforts and labor cuts, a bit different in the US than it is to Australia. Competitive pressures from other brands we'll talk about in the near future.
Yep.
Stock market underperformance, brand reputation challenges.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you look at those, we'll separate the stock market stuff. There are also problems that even regular businesses have day to day to some degree. So they're not really problems that are new to anybody, but when you have a business that is undergoing some issues, they're probably the top ones that you'll face. So, I mean, there's no surprises there, and that's the perennial challenge for any business. But I mean, let's get to some of the other stuff that they've got going for them.
Well, yeah. So consistent quality and customization. So I think that's always been something synonymous with the Starbucks brand. Customer experience and service. Strong brand and loyalty program. I want to touch on that in a big way if we can. Sustainability and ethical sourcing. On that point, before I move on, I had a podcast with a gentleman called Maxwell Cologne at Dashwood a few years ago, and he actually said that Starbucks has one of the best coffee buying programs in the world.
Oh, they started it all.
Yeah. So, and Howard Schultz has, I guess, some tremendous leadership that a lot of people probably can thank for in coffee buying and ethical sourcing. And then, of course, innovation and technology. So, what's your highlight on those points?
I think what it highlights, and this will probably be a consistent theme throughout our discussion today in a really big way. What we determine about the caliber of somebody's business is often what we think about the taste of their coffee, but it's so much more than that. And what you got to understand is that how someone chooses to roast their coffee or make their coffee is their business. It is their business, right? So maybe with Starbucks, we can say, hey, it wasn't the roast profile that I enjoyed, or in some cases their drinks were larger and you couldn't really taste the coffee to an extent that a coffee lover was chasing that coffee flavor. But underlying and at the core of everything that Starbucks did was put a value on the coffee farmer. And what they did was establish specialty coffee and a roadmap for the rest of the world to follow in their footsteps. So it's a really important part that before we rush to judgment with any business, insofar as the quality or the integrity of that business, look deeper, right? And that's that thing where I said, even at the start of of this discussion here, we talked about looking at that cup of coffee in isolation. You have to stop doing that, right? It's the keyhole view to the doorway. You've got to open the door and see everything. And when you start to do that, we can truly appreciate how some of these businesses that are bigger or smaller operate and what values they present to us.
One thing that really surprises me about some of the, I guess, conjecture about Starbucks recently is that they've probably back of house, they've got an enormous amount of technology they work with that's the customer doesn't even see, we don't even see, and in their stores. And then you hear Brian Nichol come out and say, we want to go back to our roots, the Sharpie on the cup, writing the name, having the hangout spot, making Starbucks kind of a welcoming place to be again. It's kind of like this interesting juxtaposition where coffee is kind of desiring automation and modernization, but also keeping some of the things that kind of make the specialty of the ritual itself.
Well, that's right, because Starbucks always had couches. They had the Wi-Fi. It was somewhere where you could go that you knew you could probably use a clean toilet if you were traveling. So for a lot of people, it was a known hangout, whether you were going to drink coffee or not. And I think probably I'm getting a little bit older, and if I recognize the newer generations, a lot of straight edge kids in coffee now, where coffee is really what they're into, and they're not so much into alcohol or other forms of recreation. And so coffee shops mean that they're a hangout place. And so by creating an environment that welcomes that, and it welcomes people talking to each other and doing things like that, or just providing a comfortable platform to engage with your friends, or maybe your social media or your study, that has its importance. And for a while, people maybe didn't get it. In some markets, maybe like Australia, but now it's coming to the fore and people appreciate it.
Yeah, Starbucks. And what interesting you note about the store, because I just went to Bali, but Johan and I went to Bali a few weeks ago, and the condition of the stores is immaculate over there. They all look really tidy, and I guess that's something that that I guess is synonymous with all the stores. I'll be interested to see in this revitalization. I kind of feel like their branding is a little bit tired. Like, will Brian Nichol, in his efforts to refresh the brand in a way, do you think, like, could we speculate that maybe he'll look to give the logo or something a little bit of a refresh?
I would say I'm a coffee guy, so I'll stay in my lane
Okay.
there. You know what I mean? So there are some, if they've got the money to employ Brian Nickel, they've got their money to employ the smartest minds in global marketing. And I think what you always want to do, at least with marketing, is reflect who your true values are. So to some degree, as you said, go back to basics. Well, the basics is what? Pike Place Markets, Seattle, right? Where it's the wooden floor and you're calling it out and it is who they are. If that's where they're going for, well, there's going to be an element of history that remains with it, right? Because a big rebrand doesn't always work. Some people want the romance, and I'm sure Starbucks still has an enormous amount of people that go back because it's the place they call their home for coffee. So I think that's something that's a highly specialized thing that I'd probably say it's a watch and wait and see for me.
If you were Brian Nickel, what's one thing you would do with Starbucks right now?
Keep championing coffee. Keep doing that, because leadership is everything in our industry, right? I think you and I have discussed this a little bit. If your top motivation is to save money, make more efficiency, serve more customers, and they're your three top things, what you'll notice the absence of is coffee quality, right? And so it'll become secondary to your primary goals. If your primary goals are about coffee quality, maintaining it, augmenting it, learning about how you can continue to adapt it within your environment, then it'll stay part of the message. So I think for me, it's coming back to your why. Like, why are we here? Are you there to change farmers' lives and to support them? Then if that was always one of the grounding tenets of what you did, then keep it. Keep it.
He's got his work cut out for him. It'll be interesting to see, because one of his biggest competitors is who we'll talk about next.
Yeah,
Luckin Coffee. So Luckin Coffee started in 2017. 2025 now have 22,000 stores. Self-described value proposition: high quality, high affordability, high convenience. Now, they caused a huge shock in the C market price this year when they had one transaction worth $2 billion for Brazilian grown coffee, which is just enormous. Yeah. The numbers with Luckin Coffee just astound me. And so obviously they've got this franchise model and they're just expanding like, rabbits.
Yeah.
So, so some of the challenges facing Luckin, we'll start with intense competition, competes with Starbucks.
Yep.
Reputational and trust issues. So they had a bit of an accounting scandal in 2020 where they were sort of over-reporting the amount of money that they made. Expansion and scalability risks.
Yep.
Dependence on discounts, promotions that give away a lot of free coffee. Supply chain, which I guess they've just addressed, we just mentioned, and cost management. So your reaction to some of those?
Well, I think, again, you go back to what sort of the motivations for a brand, certainly from the lay position, from spending a little bit of time in China, I'd say that obviously market share is a huge thing. You've got an evolving demographic in China where you didn't have heavy coffee drinkers.
Evolving from what to what?
Well, probably from tea to coffee, right? Or generationally getting to the age where they're now 18 or older and they're going out making their own decisions about what they're going to drink and eat, as opposed to what mum and dad provide them at home, which is a standard. And then you've got more of this openness to social media and things like that, where you get this cross-fertilization of cultures, and is it cool to be seen drinking drink X or drink Y? And so there's those types of drivers that start acting on that community. So when you look at maybe Luckin, incredible expansion, like 4 to 5 coffee shops being put up a week at through China at times, if not more. It was crazy.
It's nuts.
And to me, that probably speaks more to a market share grab, right? That's the primary focus of doing that. There's coffee along the way, and there's, like we've seen, Hidenori Izaki has been a poster boy for the coffee there, because it was, I think it was the tagline for it was World Barista Championship.
I think they've had a few people that have been ambassadors for them.
So they're definitely spending money on it and doing the image work and the rest of it. So that's about acquiring market share in a really aggressive way. And that may not always be about the coffee. That may be part of people just getting their caffeine content as opposed to a myriad of other ways. So, but when you look at that sort of model, you also then open the door. If that model is just about market share and getting caffeine and doing it, you open the door to other brands like, say, Coddy Coffee, which is a step under Luckin, which is really going in super, super hard. I think it's maybe around 65 RMB for maybe 10 coffees over there. Which
RMB, what's that?
renminbi, so Chinese yuan. So,
Okay.
and to give you the maths on that, I think 7 RMB is 1 Aussie dollar,
Okay.
right? So you're talking 10 coffees for, not a lot of money. So that model really has changed the game in terms of recruitment of coffee drinkers in the market.
Coffee in China just fascinates me because obviously the level of technology that they operate with is just like far above what what we do in Australia. I've never been to China, but I've researched it a bit and it fascinates me. Something you mentioned there I found interesting as well is you spoke about the Chinese youth.
Yeah.
And it kind of I kind of think of that in the same light as like youths in the Arab world where following on from the Arab Spring in 2011, sorry to bore you with international history, dear listeners, they had these revolutions in a lot of Arab countries where they overthrew their leader because they want to modernize their countries. And you look at countries like the UAE and Saudi Arabia where they're making huge efforts to move on from this social conservatism and modernize their country and bring in more things like coffee and boxing and technological innovation. Do you kind of see any parallels there?
Well, culturally speaking, I think China's doing their own thing. There is, what we look in other environments is relative to them. When I look at China, there's maybe in their younger generations more of a reaction to the working culture, as in the relentless drive, right? So you have that, I forget it's off the top of my head, but there is an acronym that young Chinese people use that was around working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. I'm not sure. So
if we've got a producer that
something like that refers to the amount of work that people did, right? So, there was a strong culture of that's just you just worked and worked and worked and worked because it's hyper competitive. It is difficult to pay your bills. And so you're really driven. So
they got that dog in them.
Then yeah. And then you had this other, small movement in China was, I think it was lying flat or something where people generationally said, I don't want to do that. I'm not getting on to this relentless working because I'm not finding happiness, right? It's not where my fulfillment lies. And people don't know where their fulfillment lies, but they're trying to figure that out. So these aren't necessarily revolutions. They're evolutions of generations within an industry within a country that are unique to them. To me, I find that really interesting because each country then will start to develop its own culture of coffee and how people will do it. And for a really long time, maybe a lot of the APAC countries followed in behind Australia and other popular countries. But what you're really seeing is a lane shift where, to some degree, China now doesn't follow us. They actually really do their own thing in a huge way. I mean, you've got these mass rollouts. You've got specialty coffee in China is great.
Yeah.
Right. It is great.
They grow their own coffee that's quite good now as well.
You've got government support for people in Yunnan. You've got internationally renowned baristas, guys like Jeremy Jiang, who's M2M over there, and a bunch of other local roasters that are really pushing the boundaries. As we know, China's got huge population. So sometimes a small proportion of their billion-odd people or more can move the needle a tremendous amount. And that's where you're seeing not necessarily – I really want to caution people, don't look at China as somehow negative because they bought $2 billion worth of coffee.
They just guarantee the supply.
They get nervous, but like they've got people who want to buy their coffee, and they've got a coffee drinking culture. So go and buy it because that's a good thing, right? So we can have a coffee glut and then no one's buying it and farmers are walking off the land because they can't sell their coffee. So, this is that go beyond the cup mentality. So for me, coming back full circle maybe to Luckin, it's about recruitment of new coffee drinkers, people beginning their journey with coffee. They may stay with Luckin. They may go to some of the other brands in China like Cotti, or they might go to Manna Coffee or maybe a Seesaw or some of the other small independents. But all of it is recruitment of coffee drinkers, maybe away from tea to a degree, or even soft drink, where we saw the US market really evolved in competition with soft drink. You're recruiting people into the coffee industry, and then from there, they're making their own choices.
And they're wildly big in obviously automation as well, and it seems to me like they deliver on that. I went to a Luckin Coffee in Singapore Airport just a month ago, and your order on the panel. It's all pretty good, user friendly. Then you get your coffee quite quickly. There's 2 people operating it. There's 50 people in line. They do quite well for what they're doing.
And culturally, that's a norm for them too.
Yeah.
Like ordering like that, queuing, all that sort of rigorous administration sort of side is very normal. We might find that a little bit of a challenge because we want to order with a person because we're used to a very different al fresco dining sort of point of view when we're self-referencing back to Australia. So again, we're not looking at China and Luckin like they somehow have deliberately steered away from us. They're culturally doing what's appropriate to them. QR codes on the table. They've got an integrated payment system in WeChat and Alipay and everything else, far more sophisticated. And all coffee has done is really gone into that ecosystem.
I feel like they embrace technology over there at a quicker rate than we do here in Australia and perhaps even the Western world.
And maybe because of population density and a few other factors, it's a necessity in order to save time because you're busy, right?
Yeah.
You're really busy, whereas we are not necessarily, I'm not going to say we're all lazy, right? But we have a different time schedule. We have a 2-day weekend and we work a 9 till 5. And so it's a different style of coffee drinking life.
There's a comedy show going on back there. I don't know who it is. We're gonna find out why they're laughing so much after, and maybe we'll post it in the show notes. Blank Street Coffee. Let's move on to Blank Street Coffee. They started in 2020.
Yep.
Venture-backed startup, 100 locations now. Mission is to create daily rituals that enrich your life. Have been a good example of leveraging technology to increase the human-to-human interaction, resulting in better customer experience. First question, have you been to a Blank Street?
I haven't. I haven't.
It looks pretty like Starbucks with better branding to me. I don't know if that's harsh but they've got some good varieties of drinks. But again, looking at them, they've really embraced the technology input and having smaller spaces. And I mean, I've never had one, but it seems like it's doing well.
Yeah, well, let's be honest. We know super automatic machines can make great coffees. We've got them here. I mean, I've said it before that, maybe a Coles Express Eversys coffee is a really popular coffee in Australia because of its value for money at that price point. If you look at Blank Street, it's not a quantum shift. You've got Eversys machines, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, Eversys. Right?
And you've got people taking that order because people want a little bit culturally as a personal connection, right? Again, we just referenced China where it's maybe a little bit more, it's a transaction and there's less of the humanity in it because culturally that's not appropriate to them. It's not a good or a bad or assessment of any form. It's just what is. And so maybe, you look back is a Blank Street a cut down version of what Starbucks, was going to become at some point where you get rid of unnecessary floor space, cut down, like occupancy costs. You want high turnover. You want to have what is your stickiness in terms of the transaction. Well, this person knows my name and they will speak to me because oftentimes we know baristas and people at the POS could be, almost like your everyday counselors. You talk about your problems, you talk about your life, you talk about the weather, and that's a bit of social interaction. And people really crave that for the most part in their coffee experience. Again, I'll just come back to that same point. It's exactly the reason why we don't view the cup of coffee in isolation. It's because there are other things related to that. And so from that point of view, Blank Street are filling that void where you might dehumanize that transaction if you didn't include the smiling face and didn't reach out to them. So, are they Starbucks 2.0? I don't know. Or will that Starbucks be big enough to be able to really fill that void before something like Blank Street proves to be, the next thing that people go for?
It'll be interesting to watch their success over the next few years, but some of the things they do well. So affordable specialty coffee. It's one of the high selling points of them. Small footprint, tech-driven convenience, so strong customer emphasis on app-based ordering and loyalty programs as well. Expansion and scalability. 100 in 5 years isn't too bad. It's no luck in, but it's not too bad. Sustainability and ethical sourcing. So some of the things they could fall short with. Lack of strong brand identity, limited store experience. Obviously, smaller stores have that impact. Dependence on tech and mobile ordering. So I've had a few instances with this in the last few months where Square's gone down and, really kind of you have to mobilize to, it can be a bit of a disaster. Inconsistent quality and service. I'd love to know how they train their humans if the selling point of their sort of what they're offering is, the human to human interaction.
Mhm.
Rapid expansion risk. So your reaction to those?
Well, they're not doing rapid expansion because if you look at Luckin, they're doing 4 stores a week, and by the numbers, I think what did we say? Blank Street's doing 25 stores a year. So rapid expansion is eminently possible for anybody if you have the right people and you have the right resources or enough resources to do it. So I don't think Blank Street really has any major problems that anybody else wouldn't face. Their challenges might be something like how are you convincing people that you're different, right? Because we already know Starbucks do ethical sourced coffee, and so do a number of other roasters, if not a very large amount of roasters, are relying on some form of ethically sourcing. I think that the affordable specialty is a confusing thing for the consumer, right? It's a bit like this. There's 2 types of music, good and bad, right? That's it. And I think there is 2 types of coffee, good and bad, right? I think if we say specialty, look, and I'm not trying to get on a high horse and be a coffee person and say it, but I mean, you can buy specialty coffee and then roast it really dark. So does that mean you're not specialty?
Yeah.
Or does that mean you are buying specialty because you are, but you're choosing to do something different with it? And are you buying the specialty so that people buy you because you're specialty, or are you buying specialty because it tastes great because you want to roast it and get it to a point where your product tastes superior?
I feel like specialty is just increasingly becoming a label now without much meaning. So
I think what people want is they want no buyer's remorse. They want to know that what they bought is okay, that makes them feel good at the end of the day. So oftentimes specialty gives you some assuredness that I didn't buy cheap rubbish, right? Maybe something like that. I could be off. But the point being is that specialty is now ubiquitous with coffee at large, but there are and there's people have talked ad nauseum about what is specialty, right? And that's a little bit like what's a piece of string, because you make it terribly, doesn't matter how you roast it, still not going to turn out so great. You roast it terribly, you change that whole footprint. So I think we steer away from those terms. And I think when we say affordable specialty, I think to me, it's got to be about value for money. Was that experience, not the coffee, value for money?
Well, we've got our own, you don't have to agree with this term. I'll just say it on my own. So full disclosure, this is my words only. We've got our own copy and paste version of Blank Street here in Melbourne. It's called Other Side Coffee. And so they effectively do more or less the same thing. And I've had a coffee there and it's not too bad. Their selling point is they do it for $3.40 or something. No extra charge for alternative milks, no extra charge for, extra shot or anything like that. So tremendous value really on face value. Does it always deliver? But I don't always see their stores that busy. So and I think it kind of goes back to what you were saying before. It's like the value is not always in the price, just what you deliver, how you deliver it, and how it's valued by the customer.
And maybe a portion of their market is there is a period of time where the people that do that maybe are time poor office workers who go out and get that one coffee and they queue and they go hard and then they're not there. And then those other people that, maybe float a little bit more through their days, maybe are a slightly different consumer that will go, oh, I'm going to take the time. I'm going to sit down and have a cup of coffee and enjoy not only the coffee, but the environment and talk with my friends. And I can't do that on other side. So you've only got a certain demographic, right? So from that point of view, I mean, you can appreciate Other Side's model is catering to a certain coffee drinker, right? The success of Other Side will be, is there enough people that choose that as their coffee?
Because you have to sell like 50% more than a successful cafe does.
At the end of the day, we don't know. We don't know their lease agreements. We don't know their cost of coffee. We don't know a lot of other things. But assuming that they have done reasonably well till now, and if they keep their labor costs down, if you're really looking at a labor cost below, on a kiosk level, maybe below 25%, I mean, that's in really, really good territory. Occupancy costs below maybe 4 or 5%, and you keep your costs of goods there as down low as well. You start making an argument for a business that's structured towards making profit out of a small space. The question is, do you have enough foot traffic or transactions and average transaction cost to generate the revenue that gives you enough to surpass your fixed costs and get into a point where you're starting to make money, right? And that's really the idea. And I think that's the fundamental difference when you look at businesses maybe in China or densely populated countries in Asia more broadly, is that the foot traffic and the number of transactions someone could secure are far greater than maybe what you might get in Melbourne. What do we have? Maybe 3 million people a day or something in the bracket of that coming to Melbourne.
Yeah.
Between all of the cafes that are there, as opposed to a Shanghai, which has 25 million or probably something like that in the city itself, if not more. Right. So we have to look at it through two different, I guess, lenses. So it might work, but you have to make sure that within your food group or your target market that you've got sufficient numbers.
My business partner, Johan, here is heading to Shanghai in, I think, next week. You've been to Shanghai a number of times, I take
Number
it?
of times. Yeah,
What would you recommend for him or anyone visiting Shanghai?
Well, traditional Shanghainese food is beautiful. I love it. I love it. And I love the fact, like, I go and try and go to little noodle bars and things like that because I absolutely love noodles. And dry noodles for me and the soup on the side, I've got to say that is just the way I love eating. And so there's a myriad of places where you can go in China. But I think if you're going to go to China or Shanghai, I should say, have a look and stand back from the venues that are there and be an observer, right? If you get too close into it, it could be a little different and you may miss the point. And one might be, say, you might sit and say a Manor Coffee, for instance, right? And you think this is a busy store. But I've sat in them for half an hour and there was 8 people in there. But there was a delivery person coming in almost every 30 seconds to a minute, taking a drink out of there. So there weren't that many people sitting in the stores, but there were constant delivery people taking drinks to people all over the place.
Similar in Bali when I was just there, they had this Jago thing and they just, deliveries going everywhere.
Yeah, so makes me worry about the level of rubbish, because when we talk about what we're trying to do, save the planet, the rest of it, that's an area where I feel like there's a responsibility within the coffee industry. So I think we need to sort of make sure we regulate stuff in that area, but without getting off track, go to as many cafes as you can. I think what you want to do is look for the emergence of specialty cafes and of the ilk that have come from the baristas that have won competitions. You've got people like, as I said before, Jeremy Jiang, and you've got other baristas that have won national titles in China that are opening venues now in neighborhoods across Shanghai. And I think probably just get onto your main sort of forums within WeChat and go to those places, because first of all, you'll have amazing coffee experiences on par with Melbourne. Certainly, you'll get things there, but you'll get a very, very Chinese style of it. I think there's some really wonderful tiny store designs that I think are great. But just soak it in. It's Shanghai is an amazing city. Like, just the sheer scale of it, right? And the amount of people, and that it just works, right? I think all I'd say is you just got to be careful, because once they went from like no 2-stroke and over to electric, you can't hear. When you're on the road, you're liable to be run over if you don't look.
So there's that many electric cars there?
Well, it's not electric cars. It's also electric scooters and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
You can't hear them.
Okay.
Right? So they're just, it's quiet, right? And so you've got to be on your toes when you're crossing the road. That's probably the one thing I'd say. There's some great aspects, but if I had to be critical of Shanghai, I only say is you can't afford to look down.
Okay.
Right?
Well, you heard
you need to look around.
Don't be on your phone while you're crossing the road, okay?
Don't want to do that.
Just be careful. All right. Now, this last coffee brand that you actually introduced me to a few days ago, which I think is fascinating. This should be on everyone's map.
Yep.
Jago Coffee in Indonesia. So I'll just read a little bit of a blurb about it. So what it is, mobile coffee carts that basically take coffee to you effectively. They're from their website. We aim to make great coffee sourced in Indonesia, accessible to anyone. Opening up cafes requires a lot of money and requires significant time to launch. So instead, we created an electric vehicle cafe that was mobile, a cafe on wheels, a cafe that can come to you wherever you are, whenever you want it. So, Jago Coffee, run by, one of the partners is as
Joshua Tanner.
Joshua Tanner, a mutual friend of ours. I think this is fascinating.
Well, I think you got to go one layer deeper with Jago and understand that the pricing of their coffee, which I think is probably relative to around 60 cents or something like that. My conversations with Joshua when I wanted to understand a little bit more about Jago represented something where I think he's very insightful, but it's also representing something that's eminently democratic about the world of coffee. there's a lot of blue collar people who live on not very much money day to day. If you've been to some barista competitions, as I have done in Indonesia, for some people, their most prized possession or their most expensive possession is their phone. Otherwise, they're living not far above the poverty line or at the poverty line, right? And these are passionate people. So there are people out there that want to drink coffee, but they can't afford maybe the coffee that is served at common grounds around. That's a different demographic, might be expats, might be more wealthier, middle class, right? And that's perfectly fine. That's a market. But there is an enormous market within Indonesia of people that make do with very little. And I think what Jago does that really excites me is, again, it makes coffee accessible to a really large proportion of society that might otherwise not be able to afford it, right? And so within their model, this mobile nature of their cafes where they can move around, so they're not paying rent. It almost feels a little bit like almost shades of Jim's mowing, right?
Yeah.
You got your area and you've got your patch. They can also then leverage really smart tech that shows people where the customers are, and they can go where the customers are and short circuit that potential disconnect between, well, my usual cafe is not near me, so I've got to go without, or I'll go somewhere else.
And you've been to Jakarta, right? We're on our way there in May, I think. So, but
Yeah.
I've not been there before, but I understand there's a horrendous traffic issue there. Like traffic is just amongst the worst in the world. So
yeah. I mean, Jakarta's not great for traffic. Neither's Manila, by the way,
okay.
and maybe Bangkok. They're all cities where you've got huge concentrations of people. So a lot of it relies on, and that's why we see scooters and things of that nature, because it's you can obviously fit so many more. If you've been to Vietnam, I mean, it's almost romantic in its urbanness, but when you just see flocks of, like scooters going down the street and so many people traveling on a road and it just works, it's almost like ants or something, and everybody knows where everyone's supposed to be, and there doesn't seem to be crashes, but it stressed me out. But Jakarta, I don't know. But
well, it fascinates me about this concept though, because like you said, you're democratizing and giving accessibility to coffee for more people, which is, I think,
I love that.
Some people might think of it as say, 60 cents in the specialty coffee industry, and think that you're doing a wrong thing. Well, actually, you're giving access to people who otherwise can't get a cup of coffee to a cup of coffee.
That's right.
So some of the positives about Jago: accessibility and affordability, unique mobile coffee concept, strong use of technology, supporting local coffee farmers. So one thing I've noticed about Indonesia, the huge sense of altruism around their domestically grown product. And
well, you look at barista comps. I don't think there's ever been an Indonesian barista champion who hasn't used some form of Indonesian coffee, or maybe like a cascara at the very least as part of their routines. It's always part of it. There's been an incredible sense of pride.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a hallmark of Indonesian coffee, that there's, we grow coffee. This is who we are, and we're really proud of it. I think that's great.
But they're kind of like this sleeping giant in the global context, because their economy is currently, I think, the 6th biggest in the world, will become the 5th. And they're a vastly modernizing country. And, the former president, Joko Widodo, kind of, I was reading a little bit about him, and he kind of, some of the programs that he implemented, just there's an enormous sense of pride amongst Indonesians. Obviously, there's problems with their government, with corruption and that sort of thing, and
that's everywhere.
That is everywhere. But like they're kind of a sleeping giant within the global economy, and then probably within the coffee industry as well.
Yeah, and I think what Jago also realizes, that some people, if you scratch the surface, the uptake of mobile phone-based interactions by population standards is one of the highest in the world of any society. So Indonesians have mobile phones and they are connected. So if you're creating, a coffee platform where even people that are of, less affluent parts of society have still got mobile phones, and it's a strong level of interaction, you're really tapping into what is accessible for them, and you're getting eyeballs. So it's a huge part. I mean, Joshua and I'm sure those guys did all their homework, and they really understand it's not just, I mean, this is the beauty about it. Sometimes a successful business, you're seeing the gap for the total sense of what it is. It's not just there's nobody doing it, but it's maybe the sense that you can really do some good. There is less competition, and that if your particular style, which their Jago style is quite unique in terms of coffee making, works for that target demographic.
How do they make their coffee?
So if I understand it correctly, and I'll apologize wherever I need to, they have almost like kitchens that are dotted around geographically, around Indonesia, where they grind coffee and then make it and almost make a concentrate, right? And then that concentrate then is added to the carts, and then people are then building a drink as we would. So they're not necessarily making espressos. They've got a coffee product that they then build on the cart. They can do that very quickly.
And it's very hot in Jakarta, so obviously
a lot of iced coffee,
making a lot of iced lattes that are ready to roll. And I like that. The next point I was going to say is they're empowering a lot of micro entrepreneurs. So 100%. It's like not just giving someone a job, but an opportunity to kind of work your own hours and
provide for their families.
Yeah,
right. And if I go to your cafe because I know you, right? So I'm inclined to want to support you. So you're giving another part of society, you're giving them a vocation, and then other people who can afford it will support their friends. So you're not trying to get, like rock stars from out of town to come do that. That's a completely different market. And I think to some degree, that's why Jago is really exciting, because they see what other people haven't. And that is, these people want to drink coffee, but no one's giving them that opportunity.
Next point I was going to say is rapid expansion, strong investor backing. So they secured $6 million in Series A funding in April 2024. Sustainability and innovation, convenience and speed. So bit of a theme here amongst a lot of the things you mentioned.
Well, I think, when you look at the overheads to produce a cart and the rest of it, it's a lot easier than a store.
Yeah.
You could probably redeploy a cart if somebody didn't work and you'd take it back and flip it again. You can't always do that with stores. We saw huge investment in Kopi Kenangan in Indonesia with, I think that was Jay-Z, Serena Williams, and maybe Beyonce and a few other people were investors in it.
Okay.
And that was pretty big in Indonesia, but that stalled a little bit just because that model is a challenge, Indonesia, because again, it comes at a cost. And it is very competitive over there. There's a lot of, competition for coffee there. So I think the model that Jago has is far more nimble, right, within the market, and it provides the ability for people to have a limited level of exposure. Maybe for some of these people, it's, it could be the opportunity of a lifetime, but it's also not going to cost them a lifetime of debt, maybe potentially, if it doesn't all work out for them.
I like that thought of incentivization as like you're not just an employee. You can go out and sell as many coffees as you like, and however long you work, or however hard you work, however hard you strategize, you could succeed. So
and that's what we all know. I mean, for people that have owned businesses, when people treat it like it's their own business with a sense of pride and ownership, you always get great employees. You can tell them every time. You see people go, you know what? They go the extra mile because they see it as their duty to it. And that's sometimes what separates people that are amazing employees from, okay, they're good, but their focus does lie elsewhere. And those people are still great too. But that element of being able to harness that cultural aspect of someone doing it, especially if they're working on their own, just means that some people see it as their opportunity to pull themselves out of a situation or to go for that opportunity for what could be next and next and next.
All right, some of the things to be skeptical about with Jago Coffee, some challenges they might face: scalability and operational challenges, competition from established coffee brands, customer adoption and retention, brand differentiation. I think I've lost some of my notes here. Sorry. Yep, I have. We'll just end it there.
Yeah, look, I don't see many of those being a problem. I think what they have to do is I would be more concerned about available supply, right? Because if it takes off, you've got to have huge abilities to make lots of coffee. There's no point doing it and then running out. So their biggest issues will be supplying demand. If demand kicks off, I would say will be their element, right? Because if people are doing something mobile, they go to that thing and then I guess that opportunity to buy the coffee and then it's not there, that's the missed opportunity. And I think that'll then probably speak for other people may want to enter the market then. So I would say supply issues is probably a big one. Not so much on the other ones. I think their overheads are fairly manageable.
Is in the same context of that supply issue you mentioned, obviously a big part of what they were saying is that they're using Indonesian grown coffee. So if you're using Indonesian grown coffee in Indonesia, there's less freight, all those sorts of things. Yep. I think they're the third biggest coffee producing nation in the planet. Is that correct? Fourth, you say?
Yeah.
And so obviously there's an enormous amount of coffee that's produced there, and there's local access to it. And Indonesia has some interesting trade laws and kind of protectionist trade laws.
Yep.
So they're also the biggest producers of nickel in the world.
Mhm.
And one thing I was researching the other day is that it's actually illegal in Indonesia to export raw nickel. It also has to be refined there.
Yep.
And you look at that within the context of kind of like the Donald Trump trade tariffs and things like that are going on right now. It's like,
Yep.
a lot of people kind of demonizing Donald Trump right now for the policies he's implementing, but there's other countries that kind of like, they do things that are contrary to what free trade is. So, sorry, that's deviated away from Jago Coffee, but you know.
No, I mean, look, I probably wouldn't go down that path because I think it's another whole conversation. But I think you just look at the motivations. You've got an awful lot of people that live below the poverty line. So if people are looking to help people survive and live, I mean, you'll always see people in their countries doing what they believe is the best for their society, right? And I don't think we should begrudge that, so long as the basic tenets of, a cooperative nature and being globally minded. I mean, I said this phrase a long time ago, and I think people do it too, but you think global, but you shop local, right? It makes a big difference. You be aware, but you really got to still provide for local economies. So
Matt Perger says that every time he leaves the cafe. He says, shop local, think global.
Well, it's because it's true.
Yeah.
And so from that point of view, I don't think we should be frightened of people wanting to support their country for the right reasons.
Well,
I think
Indonesia fascinates me because they've got this position in a foreign policy context of strategic ambiguity. They're not enemies or friends with the US. They're not enemies or friends with China. Well, sorry, they're friendly with both. So it's like I really appreciate that. And, they're kind of positioned for success because they're growing.
Yeah, and obviously being able to remain open or pardon the pun, but stay Switzerland in part of it may be the best way to manage their economy for the best interests of their constituents. So, I mean, that's fine. I mean, geopolitics would be another whole different sort of session, which I'm probably less qualified to speak about. But I would say within coffee terms, it's great because, you see it as well. You'll see India as well. There's a hyper-localism in India, right? There's amazing coffee in India that we will never drink because the local consumption is so high that there isn't that much coffee proportionate to what they grow that leaves the country. I had an India trip within the last 2 years and I was astounded at how good the coffee was. And I'd never had Indian coffees like that because they don't leave, right? And there are tariffs on external or importing coffee from elsewhere. So I was going to cafes that were, there's a great place in India called Subco, right? And I'd really encourage anybody to look them up if you're in Delhi, Mumbai. With India, it was almost as if, and I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, with COVID, when that happened, that global diaspora of Indians, a lot of them returned home. A lot of them were really well educated, had money in their pockets or came from wealthy families, but they're coming back from abroad and they had coffee experiences. And then they were back in India and going, well, I don't have what I like elsewhere. And so, you had all these people that were great managers, great baristas, great business people, educated people that went, we need this here. Subco, owned by a fellow called, I think it's Rahul Reddy, UK, who was UK based. Brilliant job. I mean, you've got, they're trying to do almost loon-esque up there type pastries and croissants, right? So I had amazing pastries there on a back street in Mumbai, which blew my mind. They're doing almost Mork level style chocolate making, but again, all hyper local. They're buying their milk local, their coffee is local, their cacao is local, their wheat is local, everything is local. And they're making these stores that are phenomenal. So if that's what that produces in country and it gives people their own identity within the product and to give employment to people, that's amazing, right? So I think, those types of things like what Indonesia's doing or what India's doing or other countries, all power to them, because for us as coffee lovers at large, all of us out here, we're going to champion this, we're going to be behind these people making successes because you'll learn something.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned about India as well, because you talk about sleeping giants. They're projected to be the biggest economy in the world. And, you look at a lot of other countries that have aging populations. They're kind of keep on reproducing at a constant rate. So good on you, India. But they have this they have a diaspora with generations of people that are born overseas that still have a sense of altruism to India as well. So my girlfriend, her parents are Indian, and always travels back to India, always speaks to family back in India, and there's like a huge diaspora of really talented people that are working in the tech world that I think a big goal of the Indian government is to actually bring their skills back to India. So, you look at that within a 20-year plan sort of thing, you're going to see enormous growth. Sorry, this is a coffee podcast, I promise you. But that fascinates me.
Yeah, and I think that's very much, if you want to get philosophical and we go to another rabbit hole, if you're a bit of an Alan Watts fan, there's a story, and if you haven't, I won't go through the whole thing just for the interest of time, but there's an Alan Watts sort of a story that he tells about a Chinese farmer, and that basically his horse runs away, and then all his neighbors come around and say, well, that's too bad, and the farmer says maybe, and then the next day the horse comes back with 7 wild horses with him. And then he's got 7 horses. And then the neighbors all come around and say, well, that's fantastic. And the farmer says, maybe. Right. And then the next day, the farmer's son is out trying to break in one of the horses, and he falls off and breaks his leg. And they all come over and they say, well, that's terrible. And he says, maybe. Right. And then the next day, the government comes to the farmer to conscript people to go to the military. And they say, well, your son's not eligible because he's got a broken leg. And everyone comes around the next day and says, well, isn't that amazing? And he said, maybe. Right. So I think when we look at things, we have to be really open to the concept of, like COVID, it was terrible for a lot of people, right? Really, it was painful, and it's probably still lasting.
I personally
negatives,
lost a lot.
Right? But always look at these things, whether it's coffee or otherwise, and I try and do this with coffee, is that these occurrences, if you seek to see the negative, that is all you will see. But I think, in my life now, as I step into consulting and other things, it's about looking at what is the outcome. So that maybe notion of what does this really mean is something that's enlightening for you personally, just to keep yourself in a better mood, all right? But also from a business point of view, maybe it could be good. Maybe.
I'm just going to say that after every crisis now. Maybe. Johan's going to say to me, oh, this is so bad. Maybe. All right. Well, let's get on to I had a list of 10 questions. Can I get a time check, Johan? How long have we been going for? 53 minutes. All right, we'll probably get another half hour in here. All right. Questions for you.
Go for it.
Which of these large-scale coffee businesses excite you the most?
Well, I have to say Jago, because I'm familiar with the other models, and having a personal connection with Joshua, look, I really wish him the success, and I love the concept that it is. So, all power to all of them, but Jago's something that I'll watch on with, some optimism, because I think that what it's doing is different, and that's what excites me about that. Yeah.
When you compare the companies and how they serve coffee to how we serve coffee here in Melbourne, what are some of the things that we in Australia might not realize or we could learn from?
That maybe, like reducing the contact time in a transaction doesn't mean that people are being rude, right? Culturally, that's just how we are.
Well, I'm sitting there on the till some mornings. I'm like, let's pump these things out. Let's get more coffees going.
And as some of us here want to come in, and it is a bit of a counselling session. It is, if you were lonely during COVID and you went out in that 1 hour, you talk to the people at your coffee shop, because that's your interaction. So we just have to be mindful again that maybe that reduced contact time is not something that is directed at sort of taking something from you, but more about ensuring the ongoing success of that business, because, the number of transactions they do that hour, determines pass or fail in terms of that business. So let's not sort of skew things in a negative sense when people are looking to, economize that time on transactions.
On one hand, all of these businesses seem to want to make coffee more accessible in some way, but in a world where prices are rising and climate change is threatening global coffee production, can these businesses thrive in the future?
Well, I think the definite answer is not all of them, all right? So we're going to see an evolution. We're going to see a consolidation, and that's all good, all right? I think people that follow the artistry of making coffee in the deeper, maybe more like that ikigai Japanese type sense, there will always be a place for that. All right. We're not going to see, I mean, as far as I know, maybe you can comment, Patricia is still selling lots of coffee and it's still an exciting place that people want to go. And it's not super automatic because people love seeing
very artisanal.
You're right. They love seeing that act of making coffee fast on scale. Right. So we might just see the people that have imperfect models being filtered out and being replaced by models that have more longevity within the market. But so we might see that, the wedges of or the quadrants of the pie change shape, but I don't think we're going to see anything disappear too much.
What do you think we in specialty coffee can learn from bigger businesses and startups?
Well, in the same way that we discussed before that some of bigger businesses don't put coffee quality into their top 3, they put profit and other things in their top 3. We might also think about making profit and being proud of it and happy with it in our top 3 alongside coffee quality. Right?
You don't think people do that enough now?
I think my experience, however limited, is that some people are embarrassed about their success. Like that they are concerned that if they champion their own success, right, that somehow they'll be poorly judged. I think people should be proud of what they do. If you make a great product, then be willing to charge for it, be willing to communicate and show people why it's a great product. So sometimes we're a little bit conservative in that framework. So sometimes when people are really successful and do an affordable product, they're out there selling it hard. That's what we should do sometimes, take some of that mentality, even if the product is maybe a little bit more expensive. In the same way that I said early on in this podcast, you can be proud to charge $6, not $5.50. Everything that leads you to that cup of coffee, handing it over to their hand, is worth it.
Because I kind of feel like within specialty coffee right now, a lot of people are effectively, in a way, divesting in the coffee that they buy because the same coffee they bought at a higher quality is not available at the same price anymore. So they're buying low quality coffee at what is now that price. So
well, and it may not, but you've got to give people a degree of, fairness here, because it may also be that the coffees that they bought before aren't available, right? So we have an availability of quality, not just a pricing challenge that goes there. So this is a good part about people that are great communicators around their business because, you have access to good coffee, but it comes at a cost. Sometimes you can make a very good result out of maybe a commercial plus grade coffee if you're blending it in, and that can be there. I don't know who that is, but I'm sure people do that, and it isn't necessarily a factor that makes a coffee drinking experience terrible. But you've got to evolve to make a product that is good at the end of the day. So, there's a lot of hands in the process that lead to a coffee being good. And yes, sometimes having all great coffee makes that a bit easier, but sometimes there is a great skill in coffee roasting. And I'm not sure the general public could really name that many great coffee roasters in Melbourne. If they name a coffee roaster, they'll name a brand. But at the end of the day, that's a person or a group of people roasting for that company that have learnt a lot through pain and suffering, in roasting. Because when people don't like it, it's all their fault.
I'm 21 people. Look at me. Look at how savagely I've aged.
So I think what we've got to realise is that there's skill to a lot of this, and some of it is turning green to brown in a skillful way and a really quality-driven way, so that it tastes great. Because you don't have to use the world's number one $1,000 pound, coffees to make a great cup of coffee, but you do have to have some line in the sand moments. 1 is good roasting, 2 is, good baristas, but 3, you've got to have a baseline of that quality. So let's not say that people that serve the most expensive coffee are the only people that can make good coffee. There's more to it.
Do you think the future of specialty coffee is less sort of independent specialty cafes and more chains like Blank Streets and Other Sides and stuff like that?
It's a bit hard when we say specialty because we've sort of touched on it. It's quite a nebulous type word now. Like it's, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's lost its value.
Yeah, or it's become mainstream, and so it's not value. It's just a word out there that is identified by more people, and it doesn't define the smaller segments that are operating above specialty. So I think get to know where and who makes your coffee and learn. And if you keep doing that and you keep asking questions and you follow it because you love coffee, you'll end up at the doorstep of the people that make great coffee for you.
How effective are loyalty programs and the customer retention programs of some of these big companies? Because a theme I identified in your Blank Streets, Jago, Starbucks, and Luckin, they've got a huge focus on retention. And even Johan, who comes from a tech background, when we sort of opened up our shop, it's like, all right, how do we keep retention high? How effective are these loyalty programs, and how far do these companies go for that high rate of retention?
Well, let's just acknowledge something straight away. If they weren't effective, you wouldn't see big companies using them. So we can say from the get-go that if you get that right, then they are effective. The question is it effective for their target market alone, or is it effective for everybody? A lot of it is data, right? So when you do frequent flyers, that information tells people about your buying habits. You're sharing your buying habits in the same way that the algorithms that look at your search engine history give you and populate in your stream the things that are in the ballpark of what you're talking about. I mean, we've all seen that when you talk about something and then it turns up in your social media feed. It happens. So data is hugely important, right? But you still need to know which way you're going to point. So I think data in combination to a very clear marketing and sales strategy forms a layer of robust proof of concept. And that's where it's really important because, look, you remember your failures more than your successes, right? Your failures will always teach you more. So if you're learning from the data from those failures, you're learning which way to go to. The same way that, when I first started selling coffee in the 90s, right, at a place called the Coffee Company in Carlos Street, Balaclava, I quickly learned that if I asked people what coffee they liked, they had no idea. But if I asked them what they didn't like, they could tell me with great accuracy the things they didn't like. And that immediately put me in the situation where I knew what they wanted. So data and that feedback and taking on board can be tremendously valuable in maximizing what you're going to get. And I think also too, what cafes are doing now is you're seeing emergence of signature drinks. Remember, they were just the weird, funny drinks at the end of a barista comp. And now you're seeing these signature drinks that are at $12 or $15 that aren't coffee-based necessarily, that are flavour and visual-based in cafes, and they're helping to increase spend. They're attracting new customers and people are seeing what they are. And guess who did things like that? Starbucks, didn't they?
Isn't it amazing how quickly the cultural revolution within coffee has occurred?
Yeah.
Signature drinks, for me, it's like 2 or 3 years, they've just completely taken over the game.
Yep.
And the cafes that are doing the best now are the ones that do signature drinks, like the Mont Blanc at Good Measure in Melbourne. And I had a pretty intimate relationship with them, in a few ways, because one, I interviewed them, but two, I was their cream supplier when I worked for Riverina Fresh. And they go through a lot, and they sell something like 500 to 600 drinks a day of Mont Blancs.
Yep.
So, and they charge more for it. Great, fantastic for them.
Exactly. And so you just got to be alive to that. You've got to be a student of the game. And if it's a reward program that teaches you, the data's everything if you can learn from it and, have some basic ideation people within your business, right? It's not just sometimes procurement people. It's actually some other people that can look at two seemingly unrelated phenomenon and then make the link, right? You see a lot of entrepreneurs, the very root of their success is about that ideation of linking two things and going, but what if, right? So I think that's a really great part about what we're doing. And so, when people go, cig drinks, they're so stupid or I don't like them, whatever, well, maybe.
So I've had to change my mind on it because I used to detest them. I'm a coffee guy only, but now it's like, no, I'm over Mars, and now I'm a matcha guy, believe it or not. Yeah. I really enjoy good matcha. And the next guest we'll have on have built success completely off, not completely, but almost completely off doing really great matcha drinks. So
and that's right. And so that's where we've just got to remain open to things. You can't, rush to judgment on all of these things. You've got to look at the data and look where your constituents or your coffee drinking community is at. What is your culture versus what you're trying to sell? You may have gone and see something in Korea, but somehow it doesn't translate over here. Well, there could be factors like the fact that 50% of the coffee served in Korea is black, right?
Yeah, wow.
Is black coffee, right? There's a huge amount of iced black coffee going on over there. Is that the same here? Not really. Although iced lattes and iced black coffees are on the rise here.
They are.
But you have to understand that's the beauty of these cultures, right? And that's why we should be living and thinking globally, because you can watch and you can learn. You can see what goes on. I mean, people have been saying since time immemorial, traveling gives you a perspective, right? Whether it be coffee, history, people, whatever you like. There's an inherent value to leaving your own country and going and exploring, or just leaving your own town.
I cannot agree with you more on that, because I recently just traveled to the Middle East, and I learned so much from that I've brought back to my own business and inspired me. You're 100% right.
And much the same when people come to Melbourne, we underestimate just how much people revere coming to Melbourne as one of the premier coffee cities in the world. People have other worldly experiences, right? And we miss that. And we don't, as I said, it goes to some of my comments around people not backing themselves or not realizing the true, importance of what it is that they're doing, I remember back in the day when Ben Morrow was working at St. Ali, right? And
those are the days.
And he was the original latte art cowboy, right? He was a guy that was making latte art, not only pushing the boundaries in terms of skill, because he was one of a lot of people that did that, but he also opened it up to a bigger market where people just went, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. The guy just goes out and does his own thing, right? And he had a ton of skill. I remember Ben saying to me once, he was at a coffee competition and a guy came up to him and said, you're my inspiration, and had tears in his eyes. And he was like shocked that someone would view him like that, because he didn't really take himself as seriously as that. But I think it left an effect on him, because he realized what he did was really important, right? And for a long time, people say, well, that's latte art, it's this or it's that. Well, I can tell you that, you can do a hell of a lot of things in coffee that you can automate. No one's really automating off the wall latte art. It still is a skill that requires a steady hand and that artistic flair to be able to create a message in your head or look at something, transfer it, and do that. That is still something that is a frontier with loads of room left to explore.
And for those watching and listening, don't underestimate how hard people work at getting better at latte art as well.
Caleb Cha, another guy.
Well, you and I both know as well, Shinsaku Fukuyama, and he, after work every day for 3 hours, mind you, this is a guy that worked 10-hour days or whatever, stayed back for 3 or 4 hours and practiced his latte art every day. People work unbelievably hard at it.
And not just Australian latte artists. We know that there's people in Thailand, there's people in Korea and elsewhere and globally. That work that people put into that art form make it the art form that it is. Right? And so that's what I mean. Sometimes we just don't appreciate and stand back from the work and recognize the artistry that's in it. And sometimes we maybe see too much artistry in things that don't deserve it as much.
Isn't it funny how I asked you a question about loyalty programs and we end up at latte art? I love this.
Well, look, we can still come back to the data on that, because you can say, in some respect, those latte artists, right, use social media as their platform, right, as their loyalty program, right? Because that's where they're posting, that's where they're interacting with their people. So that's, are these people's Instagram streams, their loyalty programs.
It's one of my guilty pleasures sitting there and watch people draw like a 3-headed hydra in a latte. I was like, damn, that's impressive.
Yeah, and knowing that your reach is high and then seeing the sales happen in your till, that's a loyalty program, albeit maybe a series of events. But if you understand what it is and you leverage it, sure, go back. Some of the bigger companies that have got loyalty programs, through it, where you can see your reoccurring customers. I mean, Square will give you that, to other things. There are a lot of things at our disposal in our businesses that can make us better. And again, some people are mastering them a lot better, bigger companies know how to use the old school, but now we know that these bigger companies have to step into the modern era with some front-facing customer stuff, not all, engine room stuff, which is, the eating a bit with transactions. They have to work in social media. They have to do all these other things because that is a new way to attract, retain loyal business.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point that you raise, and the data fascinates me behind that as well. I do have some more questions for you though.
Go for it.
Within the current coffee sort of climate with rising prices and all that sort of thing, and we mentioned before the massive transaction that Luckin Coffee made for to purchase X amount of coffee from Brazil.
Yeah.
Do you think there's like a potential for an oligopoly to form among some of those bigger coffee companies to basically distort the rest of the market? Because on one hand, I feel like to myself, this might actually be temporary, the current coffee issue where the supply is low, because I've been to Brazil in years where the supply is like so much bigger than they expected and the price collapsed. So maybe it's temporary, probably not because of climate change, but do you think there's a potential for that oligopoly to form?
No, I don't think so. I think, look, you've certainly got not a lot of companies that sell most of the world's green coffee, right? They are very integrated. I don't think you've got oligopolies in that. I think it's still very much a free market. And if you're willing to pay, then the price will go up and there'll be demand based. So, if there's less supply, that will drive the price up and more people who want to stay making coffee will keep buying it. And that won't always be the most salient thing for a large business to just keep paying more and more and more and more and more for their product. At some point, it's going to reach its breaking point because the commitment levels become maybe not worth that.
I found it astounding that they purchased that amount of coffee and they locked it in at like, I think it was $2.45 or something. And then you look at it now, it's like, what was it today? $4 per pound, the USD for the coffee?
Well, it's smart. If anything, it's smart.
Well, they guarantee their suppliers. Like, well, we don't have a business if we don't have coffee to sell.
And so do a lot of other people, not even being that big at all. I mean, if you are a roaster above 5 ton a week, you should be locking in coffee. You should be talking to your green broker. You should be investigating supply chain costs. Because if you're not, you will find that you are subject to these situations. And even if you're not, secured out, maybe 2 years worth of supply, a lot of people are only just coming off, lower costs and now going into a higher cost bracket. So, it will sustain the people that are well organized and well integrated for a longer period of time. And those that haven't thought about that, well, then this is their come to Jesus moment very much in terms of what do I do now? My coffee is now $10 more a kilo, right? And we know, and let's not name names, but we know that there are coffee roasters now that are sending letters to their wholesale base saying your wholesale coffee just went up $10 a kilo, right?
Yeah, well, it's a shock. It's like because they haven't guaranteed or
because they don't
secured their supply, and
they don't have the ability to set aside that much cash for coffee, and your business is in an industry where that's becoming more and more important. However, there is still enough bigger businesses and business with enough diversification to be able to ride this out. But the imperfect models, we're going to see some people drop off. But what does that do? That frees up some volume for the other ones. And I think you'll still see healthy competition.
What role do you think improving technology and AI will play on the coffee industry in the near future?
Well, I mean, I'm probably not the person to comment with great confidence on AI because, look, realistically, I'm more an observer of people at the coalface and some other the more physical aspects of our industry. But I would say that people have to understand that the costs of coffee, making coffee and producing a coffee are going to rise. If you can adapt with efficiency, be it automation, otherwise AI or what have you, and that allows you to keep coffee quality in your top 3, then of course it's going to be a good thing. But if your top 3 focuses on profit to the detriment of coffee flavor, right? Well, then to some degree, you're going to lose some parts of the market. That said, we can say some people don't care what their coffee tastes like. They just need it to taste like coffee, right? So we might see a shift of behaviors, a few more people going, Starbucks might come into Australia and start securing more of that everyday coffee sort of sales that they failed to do, I don't know, 1990s or thereabouts. So there may be a reallocation of the drinking public. But I think if you're really focused on what you want to do and doing it well, you're going to survive. The key to it is it needs to be profitable enough for you to pay your people and pay yourself and keep buying that coffee and keep pushing your envelope for you to continue your business. So I think they'll deliver good things. They'll deliver bad things. But when we think about the bad things, maybe, all right? It's got to give you the impetus to think more broadly about what else can we do to keep adapting and changing.
Do you think in specialty coffee or in the bubble that I live in, for example, I won't say you live in, but I live in, do you think we should change our view towards big coffee?
No, I just think you should pay attention. Pay attention, right? Look at things, right? Our greatest resource that we have a lot of the time is each other, right? Anyone who doesn't want to tell you anything, and you're in a room with somebody who says, I can't tell you anything about my coffee business, it's all secret and the rest of it. Generally, you tend to find those people don't have anything to tell you, right?
Okay. So if they're trying to throw an NDA at you, it's
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there is maybe to distill it down, the rising tide lifts all boats. So if we're all working for quality or some form of quality and profit, be proud of it to begin with. Like putting up your prices because that reflects the investment and the value you're doing it. You are valuing your product, and that allows you then to pay your people, keep your doors open, keep people drinking great coffee. Because maybe your problem in your business is you're not charging enough, and that's why your business isn't going well. Not because you haven't got great coffee, but that story will be untold if you don't get out there and listen and learn and observe and get involved in your industry.
I saw a journalist post the other day that she got charged $6.10 for a flat white at McDonald's.
Yeah.
And so obviously that's more expensive than a flat white at my shop. So,
Sure.
If they can do it and scale it, then
yeah. And look, I'll be honest. I mean, I have worked within McDonald's, and I think they put a tremendous amount of effort into delivering a product that represents exactly what they aimed to do, right? They've invested in equipment, they invest in people, they invest in systems, they've got loyalty systems, they read data, and they really, really work hard at it. There is no mistakes within that. You may or may not like it, but the simple fact is, I think, whether or not this is entirely true, but it is said that 1 in 4 coffees in Australia is drunk from McDonald's, right? So we can say we're all specialty, but at the end of the day, whether it's 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 or 1 in 6, an awful lot of coffee is being drunk at McDonald's. So pay attention, right? Pay attention.
I want to ask you before we wrap up, we're not too far now. What are you doing these days? So you finished up from your previous job. What's Ross Quail up to?
Well,
how do you put dinner on the table?
I put dinner on the table. Well, the same way I did before. I cook it and get it there.
Okay.
But in terms of me, what I'm doing now, I've had a wonderful set of experiences that have led me up to this day that have made me the person that I am. And that's a reflection of the people that I've worked with, be it Hemro to Slayer to St. Ali to Jasper Coffee to, a bit of time there in Axel, be a bit short, and then even the coffee company back in the 90s. So I've been really fortunate to have great people in each one of those businesses give me a little bit of something and teach me. And hopefully I left a bit of positivity there too when I moved on. So what I'm doing now is focusing on the coffee industry having somebody that can pull together coffee professionals to solve problems that might otherwise not have, an agency of sorts to do it. So for me, Ross Quail is out there solving issues. So for that might be someone says, well, I'm having challenges with my wholesale sales. I've had a lot of experience in wholesale coffee sales, be it in coffee beans or whether in equipment. And I can say with a degree of confidence, I know what works.
Remember Dr. Dre's lyrics in that song with Eminem? He goes, when your album sales ain't doing too good, who's the doctor they tell you to go see? Is that kind of like the coffee edition?
Maybe.
Dr. Dre?
Yeah, okay. It could be. So I guess for a lot of the time, in more recent years, I was selling equipment and giving good advice. And that's why I had some great relationships with the customers and made some successful relationships. I guess now I'm not selling the things, I'm charging for the advice that I do. And there are enough people out there that see value in it, that are benefiting from it. And that's how I'm putting food on the table now. And what's really awesome about it, and I really, really love it, is that one day I might be working with people on sales. Another day I might be doing some product development with coffee, as in a coffee geared to a particular segment of the market. Another day I could be emceeing a barista comp. I mean, I used to do that stuff with Asker in the past, and I loved it. And I love the people that I've met along the way doing that. It brings me closer back to people and keeps you grounded. So I'm really fortunate that my day's quite diverse. And so for me, that allows me to do some ideation as well within our industry. And I'm doing a little bit of stuff overseas still, which is great, because cultures are what drive more imagination down this whole where can coffee go. So look, pull it all back. I would love to be, the person that started the first ever global coffee agency of strict coffee professionals that have a very, very refined skill set. And I might be a person that brings the unicorns within coffee together to help solve companies or individuals' coffee problems. And right now it's been for me a great success to date. And I feel very, very grateful. But what I can do from here is that there's only so many hours in the day for me. And what I'm really hoping is that there are other people that I know that are specialists within their field that I count as friends or acquaintances, that I can then help them be valued for their time as part of some of the project work that I do as well. And I'll be really, really proud if I can do that. So
in a sentence, you're effectively consulting and if someone's got an issue, you're helping them solve it, sort of thing? Or?
Yeah, helping them solve it. And you might ordinarily not be able to reach these people. You might not have the salary cap maybe to have these people on your team full time, but you get access to them in a transactional, targeted nature that delivers you a solution to your specific problems. So to me, I think the coffee industry needs that now more than ever.
Well, Luckin, Starbucks, Blank Street, Jago, if you need some consulting done, Ross Quail's your man.
Come see me, I'm your man.
Ross, thanks so much for being my first guest on this new show. We're calling it the Coffee Show with Kirk Pearson. So we're trying to do some podcasting, some other content related. So we're going to have some really different forms of coffee media, touching on a bunch of different things. Some funny, some informative, some who even knows what. But you know me, I've always wanted to be a voice for the coffee industry, and much like yourself. And we'll just see how far this goes. But as a friend, thank you so much for being my first guest and being so eager to come on and contributing in the way that you have. It's awesome always to have you on, and this won't be the last time. So thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Put it there, Governor.
Thanks for having me. And I hope you all enjoyed the listen. And if you're out there, don't ever be a stranger. Come say hi. We're in this industry all together. No one is beyond sharing a word, sharing a coffee. So I would say, there's one thing you want to take away from today is get out there and involve yourself within your industry, however you can. Make friends, make conversations, and it'll take you places.
Socials, how do we find you? At Ross Quail on Instagram?
Yeah, Ross Quail on Instagram.
At Ross Quail.
Yeah, otherwise, you can find me on LinkedIn. You'll see me there. Yep. Otherwise, contact Kirk. I'm sure, Kirk, you'll flick people my way if people really need it.
Yes.
And watch out. There'll be some websites and some more information coming up in the not too distant future.
Well, this show, I should say, is powered by Project Zero Coffee, my business. So my business partner, Johan, supporting me back here. So if you want to buy some awesome coffee, I can tell you it's awesome. Ross had one before. He said he quite liked it. He said.
Loved it.
Projectzero.coffee, if you're in Australia, will ship to you. International shipping coming soon. But thanks again, Ross. This is the Coffee Show with Kirk. And thanks for everything.
Take the rest of the day off.
All right, I will. All right, I've got another podcast after this, but all right, hooroo, ladies and gentlemen. See you soon.